This part of Japan's history has been kept a secret for more than 50 years because of how gruesome and bloody it is. It could be compared to Germany's concentration camp, only that this Japanese project was very well hidden. Japan even burned the remains of the project, and the USA also helped conceal what happened, especially General Douglas MacArthur. So, what exactly is this project, and why was the USA involved? I am talking about Unit 731, the secret facility and unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that conducted medical research to help the Japanese Army have longer endurance during battles. But their research was hardly medical because it involved a lot of torture, and it wasn't only about helping the army last through battles. When it started operating in 1937, Unit 731 promoted public health and research. At first, they used volunteer soldiers as participants in this medical project. The aim was to know how their bodies respond to hunger, cold, and diseases. But as the war reached its height, the aim of Unit 731 changed. The need for more powerful weapons of war urged them to conduct horrific studies. Unit 731 started using prisoners of war as their test subjects. From mere recruitment of volunteers, they started kidnapping civilians from nearby Chinese villages. Most of their test subjects were Russians, Koreans, and Chinese prisoners of war. So, what exactly did they do to them? Let's start with less horrific practices. Yes, this is the less horrible. Their mission to discover methods to make Japanese soldiers' life last longer did not change. However, the testing methods were brutal. One of their mission was to know how to cure frostbite. To do this, the Japanese scientists would let prisoners of war, aka test subjects, outside in cold, or submerge parts of their bodies in freezing waters until they became frozen and solid. This firm skin would sound like wood when struck. To see how it would heal, the doctor in charge would submerge the body in the water, place it near an open fire, or just leave it to heal itself. Unit 731 started to test their weapons of mass destruction on their test subjects as well. How would they do this? They would place these prisoners on the firing range and test their multiple weapons, such as grenades and machine guns. The scientists would then study the wounds, while the subject is dying or already dead. They also studied how long can a test subject last without water and food, and they were only allowed to drink seawater. The Japanese also dropped heavy objects on the prisoners to study crush injuries. They try injecting animal or mismatched human blood into a person to see its effect. To test the impact of high gravitational force, they place humans on the centrifuge, or those used by astronauts with microgravity. They would spin the prisoners at higher speeds until they blacked out or died. But the most horrifying experiments done that made the US involved in this matter was the research for biological weapons. Unit 731's new goal is to create a new biological weapon or disease to use against their enemies. To do this, they would inject the test subjects, or what they called matura, which means wooden logs with pathogens, and see how they would react. Sometimes, rats would be used to spread the plague to the subjects. Some of these pathogens are the most dangerous in human history, like the Yersinia pestis, the source of bubonic and pneumonia plague. In the process of knowing the result, they used several methods. First is vivisection, which involves opening the test subject's body while he's still alive, with no anesthesia or painkillers. The test subject would scream as the doctor opens his stomach to see how his organs respond to the disease. When asked why they needed to be alive, some witnesses said they wouldn't know the accurate result if the person died or if anesthesia was administered. The test subject would suffer a slow, agonizing death until he finally ran out of blood and died. One eyewitness even saw human body parts stored in jars or cylinders with labels such as Russian, Chinese, and even American. Once, he saw a human body cut in half and stored in a cylinder. But that's not the most brutal experiment they conducted. The authorities would force male test subjects with syphilis to rape women and even men to observe how the disease would spread in the body. When the women are forcibly impregnated, to know how the fetus develops, the pregnant would be vivisected alive to see the fetus in their wombs. To breed the most dangerous pathogens, after the patient gets infected, they will be observed. If the patients survived, Japanese soldiers would shoot them. But if the test subject gets sick quickly, the doctors and scientists will bleed them to death. Then, their blood will be transferred to another test subject. The fastest to get infected will again be forced to bleed until death. The process will continue until the last batch of test subjects receives the pathogen through the blood. The last pathogen will be the most dangerous. But how do the Japanese get the blood out of these infected human beings? According to a witness, the test subject's blood will be sucked by a tube until their heart stops pumping, and when it stops, a part of the team will jump onto them to extract the last drops. The last batch of test subjects will be exposed to fleas, and these fleas will be packed in clay bomb castings. They will carry the infection, and the Japanese will drop them in nearby Chinese villages. It was reported that thousands in nearby Chinese villages were killed because of the plague, and this is the exact reason why the US got involved in keeping Unit 731 a secret. The goal of Unit 731 was to develop biological weapons to use against the US and its allies. Biological weapons were prohibited under the Geneva Convention. Still, the Japanese thought it would be more destructive if it were forbidden. When Japan was defeated, the US discovered Unit 731, but instead of holding Japan accountable for this crime and thousands of its victims, the US let them get away with it in exchange for the findings of the project. Yes, the very reason why no one was held accountable for this is that the USA thought that the medical findings would be very beneficial for them. If they held Japan accountable, the Japanese army could burn all the results and the US will never re-access them. With limited evidence, it was only until the 1990s that Japan admitted the existence of Unit 731, but they never again discussed the matter. Unlike Germany's concentration camps, Japan's Unit 731 was left out of the history books, but it is something we should all need to be aware of for us not to repeat the same mistake and to pay tribute to the unfortunate victims of this bloody project.